This week's episode of our show is sponsored by the incredible maps by Shepeku.
These artfully created full-color maps span a large array of different environments for you to explore in your virtual tabletop games.
If you want to access Shepeku's amazing collection of thousands of maps, all you need to do is sign up for their Patreon community, which is linked down below. They drop new maps every week, and every single map pack comes with variants for different seasons, day or night, or different color palettes that you can make sure that whatever map you're inspired by, you can customize it to fit into your campaign.
These are some of the most beautifully designed maps I have ever seen for tabletop role-playing. Not only that, but they also offer some animated maps as well. Using these in your tabletop games is sure to blow your players away and inspire more adventures for yourself. So make sure to check the links below to get in on their Patreon and start grabbing some of their incredible maps.
And now, on to this week's episode. Greetings, my name is Monty Martin.
And I'm Kelly McLaughlin.
And we are the Dungeon Dudes. Welcome to our channel where we cover everything D&D, including advice for players and guides for GMs.
We upload new videos on Tuesdays and Thursdays, so please subscribe to our channel, like this video, and ring that bell so that you never miss an episode.
Today, we are tier ranking the multi-class combinations built around sorcerers in D&D 5e. We've covered almost every class up to this point, so we've touched on combinations with the sorcerer, but today we're going to be focusing in on, if you start sorcerer, what might you want to multi-class into?
We're going to be looking at how the sorcerer combines with all the other classes in the game. And if you want a more detailed example of how we're ranking these multi-class combinations, you can check out our video where we go over that right up over there.
Of course, Kelly and I have tons of biases that inform how we do these rankings. I would say a really big one for the sorcerer in particular is weighing whether it's worth delaying your spellcasting progression to pick up some new features. That tends to be one of those things that's discounted when you're looking at builds that go all the way to 20th level, but in actual play, it can feel really, really impactful. So for us, that's one of our big biases, but we try to look at everything, including combat, exploration, and social interaction as a whole.
At the end of the video, we're going to look at the community rankings and see what they picked as the top options for multi-class combinations for the sorcerer. There's a lot to discuss today, so let's get rolling.
So kicking things off with the Artificer, I actually think there's surprisingly many thematic combinations between the Artificer and the Sorcerer, although I don't know if that reflects in how effective those combos are. Immediately, I think of a Clockwork Soul Battlesmith character that combines that whole mind of Mechanicus, maybe even is playing a Warforged who has their little buddy and just is a complete manifestation of the arcane machine.
I love it didn't even occur to me to play a Warforged, but yeah, a Warforged, Clockwork Soul, Battlesmith, or really any of the Artificer subclasses kind of just turns you into the Robo Tinkerer. But I think that the Sorcerer combines with the Artificer in a lot of interesting ways, and you kind of live that fantasy of the Tinkerer pack rat. The Wizard Artificer feels more like a definite mechanic, but the sorcerer is a little bit more the mad tinkerer in their workshop, just strapping things to each other and seeing what happens.
I think that there's a lot of spells on the Artificer spell list that benefit from having Extend Spell or Twin Spell, and of course you have a lot of things that you can do with your actions and bonus actions with both characters, so quickening spells could always be cool as well. On the flip side, there's also Artificer Infusions, so can we combine meta magic and infusions in interesting ways. There's a couple neat infusions, like the Spell Refueling Ring and the Mind Sharpener, that can help with our spell casting. But in the grand scheme of things, there's two big obstacles to making all of these work. First is the fact that the Artificer is a half caster, and the second is the fact that the Artificer is an intelligence-based caster, and both classes are already getting proficiency in Constitution saving throws, and there's a fair degree of overlap between the spell lists of the two classes as well.
If you're not twinning Heat Metal, a lot of the other bread and butter spells of the Artificer are the bread and butter spells of the Sorcerer.
Precisely.
And I do think that the incompatibility of your spellcasting ability scores already diminishes the value here. Yeah, there's some cool combinations thematically, like we talked about the Clockwork Soul, but then also being able to be an artillerist wild magic sorcerer feels kind of neat. Or something like a Divine Soul Armorer could be really cool. I think thematically you can come up with a lot of reasons to make this interesting, and I don't think it's the worst option in the world, but I think it's a pretty bad option.
I think one of the big issues here is that starting at 5th level, any sorcerer can throw down Twin Haste, which is one of the strongest concentration-based buffs in the game. Sorcerers have lots of ways of getting healing spells if they want them. They have lots of ways of getting spells like Aid. They can really, really tinker with their spell lists a lot. So there's not really a lot that the Artificer offers the Sorcerer that the Sorcerer can't get already themselves. And this is going to be a recurring theme with the Sorcerer in general because it is one of the strongest classes in the game.
I do think that overall, although there's some fun and quirky options here, I think that it gets a C overall from me.
I'm ready to almost give it a D.
Okay.
Yeah.
As we move on to the Barbarian, we run into, I think, even more trouble than we did with the Artificer, because the Barbarian classically wants to rage, but cannot concentrate on a spell while doing so, cannot cast a spell while doing so. The other great Barbarian feature is Reckless Attack, which requires a strength-based attack. We can't Reckless Attack with spells. So if we are going most of the way Sorcerer and grabbing a few levels of Barbarian, we're already losing out on two of the Barbarian's most important features. Yeah, we might be able to make like a melee combatant sort of gishy spell sword character, but I don't think this is the way to do that.
Not only can you not rage when you're casting spells, but sometimes I see a player that wants to combine the Barbarian's unarmored defense with the Dragon Sorcerer's scales. That doesn't stack. You can't combine those two features together either. So there's a lot of fundamental incompatibilities between Barbarians and Sorcerers, which is a shame because I like the idea of the Rage Mage.
The Rage Mage.
The idea of like a Dragonborn, Dragon-souled character that is embodying the rage of the elements, I think is a super cool conceptual idea. And I really wish that there had been something like the Wild Magic Barbarian had a carve-out that you could concentrate on a spell while you were raging. That would have been really neat because then we could have had the Wild Magic Barbarian Sorcerer. Or I would love to see more of a spellcastery sort of combo there, or maybe even a feat that makes it work because I think it's cool.
The Zealot Divine Soul?
Oh, that would be neat too. That would be really neat. But like the Barbarian and the Sorcerer feels like one of those conceptual spaces where we should be able to make a cool Gish sword and spell character. It just doesn't work.
And I think that it doesn't work enough that, like, you know, you might say, well, what if we take more levels of Barbarian than the first few? But I think the more levels of Barbarian we take, we're diminishing our spellcasting potential with the Sorcerer. And what are you trying to get here? Because, yeah, you can make a more tanky Sorcerer who has worse spellcasting, but that doesn't feel worth it.
Yeah, I just don't know where you go here. And I've seen sometimes the argument of like, oh, find those cool non-concentration spells that you can still take into combat. Like you cast them on yourself first. And I think the ones that excite me the most tend to be ones that are A, on the Cleric spell list, which you can still Warlock. And B, that still feels like that to me that's what your party members are for.
Yeah.
Right? Trying to get this all on one character, like, I think is a little pushing it.
I think this is a D.
Yeah, for sure. So let's try to turn this ship around because we've had 2 duds so far. Coming to the Bard, we've got another charisma-based full caster. So these characters have a lot in common. The 2 classes both want their charisma as high as possible, and they both love casting spells. So this should be a perfect match, right?
I think that on paper, for all purposes of looking at the mechanics when you're reading them, it feels like it should be incredible. And it's not bad, but I don't think it's the best. I do think that What we do have here is one thing that I know as a sorcerer player is that I enjoy being the socialite of the party.
Right.
And so getting bard features like being able to have bardic inspiration, expertise, and maybe doubling down on a few of those spells to like disguise self or a few of the other features. Like if we're an elegance bard and we can't roll less than a 10 on our charisma checks, then like I do think that if you really, really, really want to play the face of the party and that's your shtick, there's some great options here. But we do give up some stuff.
So 1 level of Bard gets you Bardic Inspiration. I don't think that's enough to justify it because sorcerers have a lot of things to do with their bonus actions, and those are still long rest-based Bardic Inspirations, not the short rest-based ones. But that's fine. You also get some extra skills. 2 levels of Bard doesn't feel great, but 3 levels of Bard is where we're going to get a subclass and is where we're going to get expertise in 2 skills. So I think if you're going to do the multiclass, you kind of got to go for 3 levels into Bard, which is a pretty big commitment and is really going to set your spell casting back. Because while you're still going to have the high level spell slots, if you're a Bard 3, Sorcerer 5, you have 4th level spell slots, but you don't know any 4th level spells. Everything has to be upcast, which isn't terrible, but it's still, you have to weigh the value of having expertise and being a really, really good social character with how you value getting access to those 4th level spells. So I completely agree with you. It's not bad, but I think that's going to be a decision that you're going to have to make with what you want for your character. Do you want to trade that off? Is it worth it to you? Or, because I think that's basically what it comes down to. It's like, do you want to have an extra +2 or +3 to your persuasion checks and never be able to roll below 10 on those? Or do you want to have polymorph or animate objects now as opposed to waiting for it?
I think that this is also campaign dependent. Most DMs out there run a campaign that has a bit of social, a bit of exploration, quite a bit of combat, in which case I do think that in most campaigns, you losing out on those higher level spells is actually diminishing your ability in all pillars of play. Now, I've read of many DMs who love the social pillar of their games, and it's like you can avoid combat by being social.
Yeah.
In almost 80% of cases. If your DM is one of the people running that game, then maybe the Bard dip is the S tier.
Yeah.
But that's rare.
The other thing that's really valuable here is that Bards really like the idea of having subtle spell on their spell list.
Yeah.
But the spells that you want to subtle spell in most cases are already on the sorcerer spell list to begin with. So suggestion, invisibility, hypnotic pattern, charm person, all of these are on both classes' spell lists. So you can have those too. And I would point out as well that sorcerers do have options for re-rolling their skill checks because of the addition of Tasha's Cauldron of Everything. I think that if you really just want to win your social encounters, you just cast Enhance Ability on yourself for charisma. And then you to me, that's the winning tactic. And I feel like do you know, would expertise be even better? Would not being able to roll under a 10 be better? But I feel like high charisma with proficiency in deception and persuasion plus advantage is usually enough to win everything but the really hard skill checks. And even then, it might do it.
Thematically, there's some fun ideas here, like the Shadow Whispers.
Yes. I also like the idea of any bard with wild magic.
Yeah.
Just any bard with wild magic feels great. I like the idea of an Aberrant Mind or Clockwork Soul lore bard.
Yeah. I also really like the imagery of taking the Storm Sorcerer and with any bard, because you kind of have that rock, metal, lightning crashing behind you as you're ripping your guitar solo. What was it? Eddie from Stranger Things?
Yes. Oh, that would be super cool. I like that image. Overall, I think it's a B.
I think it's a B.
I think it's a B because you have to decide for yourself whether that's an adequate trade-off. Some people are going to say, yes, 100% it is. I can't tell you that it's worth it 100% of the time. So it's a B for me.
I think it's a very solid B because like there are several options here, but you really have to determine your campaign and your goals with the character.
Now, moving on to the class that almost always gets a B as well is the Cleric.
Yeah.
And so I think the first thing that comes to everyone's mind when you're like, you want a multi-class Sorcerer and Cleric? Why aren't you just playing a Divine Soul? And I think that's a very legitimate question. But maybe we want to combine a not Divine Soul with a Cleric dip?
This is the thing. This is the trick with the Cleric. Would I take a large amount of Cleric levels? No, I would play a Divine Soul Sorcerer.
Yeah.
But would I take one level of Cleric for a few proficiencies, maybe some heavy armor? Yeah, maybe. Would I take 2 levels to get Channel Divinity? Some of them work really well with some of the Sorcerer subclasses.
Yeah. I was recently reminded at Gen Con of the power of combining Lightning Bolt and Channel Divinity Destructive Wrath from the Tempest Domain Cleric to do 48 damage by maxing out what Lightning Bolt does. And that's something that you can get with 2 levels of Cleric, and that feels very strong. I think it's a Tempest Domain Storm Sorcerer can have a lot of just all of a sudden I do the most damage type things, and it was very impressive when it happened.
I also think that we have cool combinations, like if you wanted to strap Life Domain Cleric onto your Divine Soul just to double down on your healing abilities. If you wanted to put Light and the Draconic, but like Fire Dragon.
You could do Order and Clockwork Soul.
Yeah.
Or you could do Twilight and Shadow.
Yeah.
I think those would all be really cool combinations.
Trickery and Aberrant Mind?
Yes. Again, these are more the thematic territory, although Trickery's Channel Divinity might be really cool on an Aberrant Mind as well.
Yeah.
So 2 levels of Cleric feels okay.
I feel like I'm going to give this one a B as well. It's not... You don't want to take more than 2 levels, and that's why it could never be A, it could never be S. You want to be very careful on your pairings here, and you want to make sure that you're benefiting from the Channel Divinity. You're going to lose some spell casting, but if you're a Storm Sorcerer, being able to max out your damage... Yeah,
I think that's totally worth it.
It's kind of cool.
Yeah, it is really good. It's one of those moves that is just so cool and so powerful, because the ability to just say, yes, I am doing a massive Lightning Bolt or doing a crazy Thunder Wave is really strong. Or Shatter is really good with it too. Yeah, I think it's... Yeah, the Tempest specifically, because it also gives you heavy armor, it might be A.
That specific build, and that's why it's B.
Yeah.
Because there are some A tier, borderline S tier options here.
Yeah.
But it's no one's first choice.
Yeah, it isn't, but it's a very cool and powerful move.
As we move on to the Druid, again we have another wisdom-based spellcaster. The unfortunate thing about the Druid as compared to the Cleric is notorious for 1 to 2 level dips that give you a lot of benefits. Druids, on the other hand, something I've learned during this entire series is that Druids love being Druids. The more Druid you are, the better your Druid is. Yeah. So if we're dipping into Druid, we get Wild Shape, which could be cool on a Sorcerer, but is it cool enough?
Well, we're also now a wisdom-based spellcaster, and we didn't mention with the Cleric, yes, you got that wisdom score to figure out, and sorcerers really don't care about their wisdom either. So I feel like here is where we no longer have the ability score synergy. We could pick up a couple extra Druid cantrips, which are okay. Like, again, another point in favor of the Cleric and the Druid is grabbing Guidance and Healing Word.
Yeah.
And those are interesting things to bring, because Twin Healing Word and Twin Guidance, not bad plays. But at the same time, there's not a lot else that the Druid spell list offers us that we want as a sorcerer. Sorcerers oddly have a lot of overlap here as well. So as you said, we're here for wild shape or for a subclass feature that we really want. Is there cool stuff conceptually? Totally. Dreams and Aberrant Mind, oddly for me, feel like they should resonate thematically, but mechanically they don't. Wildfire Druid with any sort of fire-based. Stars Druid with, again, shadow sorcery could be cool feeling, but I just don't see where the abilities are that we want to match.
You could do a Spores Druid with the Shadow Sorcerer. There's kind of like Death and Decay. You could do the Land Druid Coastal with the Storm Sorcerer, kind of be like on the edge of the sea, summoning the sea gods.
Is it odd that there isn't a sorcerer subclass that kind of steals some druid stuff like the Divine Soul does for... Because it feels like the Aberrant Mind gave us, I want to kind of be a warlocky sorcerer. The Clockwork Soul gave us, I kind of want to be a wizardy sorcerer. The Divine Soul gave us the, I kind of want to be a cleric-y sorcerer. And so we don't actually have like, we need like a Fey Soul.
Yeah.
Which is the, I kind of want to be a druidy sorcerer. And we don't have that. But I just don't, and like, I really like the idea of like that Fey sorcery sort of thing. That's the natural fit of like, I'm an elf, I live in the Feywild, I'm very attuned to nature, I'm very charismatic, and I love magic and nature. And that feels like actually a very narrow archetype to realize in 5th edition, unless you're playing a warlock.
Yeah, and druids are different fantasy than that, which is kind of interesting. So yeah, I do think we need a Fey Soul sorcerer. Overall, I don't think that there's enough here for me to give it higher than a D.
Yeah, I really don't know what we're gonna pair together here.
Like, there might be a couple, like, yeah, sorcerer that can use wild shape is cool, but we also have polymorph as a sorcerer.
Yeah.
It's not as good as wild shape, but like, it's worth stating because you don't have to take 2 levels or 3 levels in another.
If you feel we're really missing something here, let us know in the comments.
Yeah.
But I just don't see it.
Moving on to fighter, this is kind of a similar argument to the cleric, where like, fighter, we're not here to take a ton of levels of fighter, but fighter has some things at early levels that everybody benefits from. Action surge.
Armor proficiencies. Weapon proficiencies. Second wind. But let's be honest, we're here for action surge.
Yeah, the ability to cast 2 fireballs in a turn, why not?
So this is where an important rules thing comes into play. Because unless you're playing Baldur's Gate 3, you can't cast 3 fireballs in a turn by action surging, using your action, and quickening a fireball. In fact, action surge and quicken spell have a certain degree of anti-synergy between them. Because let's look at the 2 in isolation. Action surge is giving you an additional action, not a bonus action. So it doesn't trigger the rule that states when you cast a spell as a bonus action, the only spell that you can cast with your action is a cantrip with a casting time of 1 action. So you cast Fireball, you action surge, you cast Fireball again. You haven't triggered that rules clause. But once you cast a spell using a bonus action, so let's say we quicken Fireball, now all the other spells that we cast using our action must be cantrips with a casting time of 1 action. And it doesn't matter what order you do this in, this is just the way the rules are. So, if we quicken Fireball, we can action surge to Firebolt and Firebolt again, but we can't Fireball.
I think it's still worth saying that you can get the ability to Fireball twice, which is amazing.
Yes, or cast 2 spells twice. But again, sorcerers have a lot of, because they have quicken spell, I feel like it's less valuable than it is for, say, a wizard or for any other spellcaster.
And really, I don't see a reason to take more than a couple levels of fighter ever. We don't want a subclass here.
Once again, this is not... The fighter sorcerer is not where we're going to go to build our Gish. It's not where we're going to go to build our spell. So there's other better combinations, even involving the sorcerer and even involving the fighter separately. But in a weird, once again, normally you see so many fighter wizards or so many fighter plus other spellcaster, and it works great. Or sorcerer plus some other thing that lets them be fighty. But here is not the best place. I don't think it's bad. I just don't think it's the best. You don't see it talked up like the other potential sort of spell sword gishy builds.
It's not bad. It's not the best. Both those words start with a B.
It's a B.
I'm gonna give it a B.
Yep, I'm gonna give it a really solid B, and say I think you'll have a good character with it. It just probably won't be the best one.
Now, as we move on to the monk, unfortunately, I feel like the monk doesn't have even the little bit that the fighter has.
No.
We don't really want key points. We don't really want martial arts.
Unarmored defense might be fine for us, but we have to invest in wisdom to make that even happen.
And it's not worth diminishing our spellcasting, investing in wisdom just to get unarmored defense when we could take like mage armor or something.
Yeah, like I know you want to be muscle wizard and you cast fist, but this is not the way to do it. Like just cast Bigby's hand, which might not be available to sorcerers, incidentally. But in any case, I think that the irony, of course, is that I think that the monk with sorcerer levels is a better monk than a straight up monk. But a sorcerer with monk levels is a straight up worse sorcerer.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just don't. I think it's flat out D tier. Don't even. Just don't. Don't do it. I mean, you've played a shadow sorcerer and you've played a shadow monk.
I was thinking of that. So two of my favorite characters were a shadow monk and a shadow sorcerer.
But not the same character.
Not the same character. But the only thing I could think of is how nice it would have been as a shadow monk to be able to see in my own darkness. And I think it's silly that they didn't give it the ability to do so. But again, that's me playing a monk and like taking a few levels of shadow sorcerer, or I would just take the Eldritch Adept.
Could you be like an astral monk clockwork soul? That could be cool.
That could be cool.
Like conceptually, you could be... Where would you be a drunken master? What would you pair drunken master with as far as sorcerer subclasses go?
I mean, also
wild magic.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, wait. There's the draconic soul sorcerer, and
there is the dragon monk as well.
Yeah. So you could be a dragonborn draconic soul dragon monk. Dragon. Double dragon, triple.
There's going to be another triple dragon later on. But I just don't think any of these work as characters.
I think it's D.
Yeah.
Sorry, monk.
Yeah, just don't do it.
Paladin?
Our redemption has come.
The redemption.
Because I feel like it's been pretty brutal so far. Like, we have had a bunch of D tier rankings.
Yeah.
And a couple Bs. And now the Paladin is here to redeem sorcerer multiclasses everywhere. And this is great. The Paladin loves having that high charisma. Mm-hmm. And with 2 levels of Paladin, we get Divine Smite, and we can dump our sorcerer spell slots into it. And that feels really good. The way to make this character build work is you still invest in strength. So you're going to wear medium or heavy armor, and you probably are going to go sword and board.
Yeah. And
you're going to booming blade somebody, and then you're going to dump your highest level spell slot into a smite and hit them really, really hard. And then eventually you're going to haste yourself or buff yourself up and just drop those really high damage smites and have better smites than a single class paladin.
I also think that if you're playing into really high level play, looking at 6 levels of paladin and the rest sorcerer is also great.
Yeah, it is.
Now, I would probably do like 2 levels of paladin, go all the way sorcerer, and then somewhere past level 10.
Yeah.
Up the rest of my paladin.
I think another way that you could go about it would be to take a level of sorcerer at the beginning to get constitution saving throw proficiency.
Yeah.
Then take your 6 levels of paladin, then go sorcerer the rest of the way. That's what I might do for my Baldur's Gate 3 character.
Fair.
Yeah.
I do think like paladin doubles down on charisma. You get a bit of healing, you get some buffing, but then also the sorcerer augments that in really interesting ways. And If you're twinning haste, you can haste yourself and somebody else.
And because look at where it gets to, because Paladin 6, Sorcerer 6 looks really good. But here's where you're at. You have 5th level spell slots.
Yeah.
You only have 3rd level spells as a sorcerer and 2nd level as a paladin. But that's not the point. The point is that 5th level spell slot is turning into a smite or is turning into upcasting one of your lower level spells. The 4th level slot's the same. So, and if you compare that to a paladin at 12th level, the 12th level paladin only has 3rd level spell slots. So if you compare straight paladin 12 to paladin 6, sorcerer 6, it's really good.
And you're getting meta magic.
Yeah, and you're getting meta magic. So you can do those things like, instead of twinning haste, which is going to be your action, you can quicken the buff spell that you want on yourself. Or you can just go to town and you can quicken fireball and then come in swinging with the smites.
I know this isn't...
It sings.
This isn't in the rules.
Yeah.
Can I convince you as my DM to let me roll empowered spell on my smites?
Ooh, no. That would be OP, man.
I know.
Could you imagine if you could do
just
that?
wanted a yes.
The other thing that you can do with this character is you can quicken Booming Blade.
Yeah.
Right? So you can, and that's a cool way to get you going early on, is you because you got extra attack, you attack twice, you quicken Booming Blade, so it's like smite.
With Booming Blade, I can't move the target. They have to move on their own, right?
I believe they do. So you
can't
couldn't
Booming Blade Crusher.
That would be cool, though. Taking Crusher would be good regardless. And I think what's cool about this character too is that even though you're doing the multi-class combo and you have to split your ability score investment between strength and charisma, you do enough damage with the smites that you don't have to take Great Weapon Master.
You still could.
You still could.
But a sword and board also.
But it works really well with sword and board too. And you've got shield in the equation too.
Shield.
Yeah.
I imagine that you have a shield that just like extends with magic.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah, it's really good.
This is borderline S?
This is S tier for me.
S tier?
This is a really strong character. Like, it just has so many ways that you can put it together.
Okay.
And that's why I will also say for the Baldur's Gate 3 point is that it is so much of main character syndrome because you're charisma based, you've got spell casting, you've got melee. Like this is the Baldur's Gate 3. This is the S tier Baldur's Gate 3 build because you're going to be able to do the social interaction stuff, and then you're going to be able to come in and feel like an absolute badass when you're swinging your smites around, and you're going to fireball people, you're going to win the social interaction, you're going to counterspell people, you're going to shield, you're going to fight, you're going to use weapons. It's great.
You know, in my mind, I was like, I will only give out one S tier this episode, and I know what that's going to be for, but no, we can give out more than one. So yeah, I'll give the Paladin an S as well.
This is great. It is the main character.
Yeah.
That's what it feels like. That's how it plays. It's great.
As we move on to the Ranger, the Ranger, to me, oddly, in this multi-classing series, has made me compare the Ranger to the Monk many times.
Yeah, because they have the same ability score prerequisite.
Now, I think that the Ranger offers you more than the Monk, but we do end up with a weird separation of ability scores. The Ranger gives us some things that we would like from the fighter style options, like a weapon style, but we don't get action surge, we don't get second wind, we get Ranger spellcasting, which doesn't really help us in any way.
Well, again, the Ranger coming off the Paladin shows very brightly why the Paladin is so good with Sorcerer and why the Ranger isn't. The Ranger and the Paladin are very similarly structured classes. They're martial half-casters. They both get extra attack, they both get a bunch of weapon proficiencies, but one is wisdom-based with a stealth focus, and the other is charisma-based with a bit of a social/divine magic focus. And the changeover that does is the Ranger doesn't have anywhere to dump those higher level spell slots. They could do cool things, like I like the idea of subtle spell to cast things with Pass Without Trace, or to quicken a spike growth or entangle. Those are all cool, but those aren't outside the bounds of what a sorcerer can already do. Yeah. And I'm not really seeing where you're getting the oomph from that.
But I can be a Dragonborn Draconic Soul Drake Warden.
Or you could be a Gloomstalker Shadow Sorcerer. And we played with a Shadow Sorcerer and a Gloomstalker in a party together, and those are two classes that I think better as separate characters than on one together.
They work really well as a team, not as a single character.
Yeah. Aside from seeing in your own darkness, which, whatever, but...
I think this is a D. I think this is another D.
I could see an argument for C-, but I just think look elsewhere.
As we move on to the Rogue, we can't sneak attack with spells, which is disappointing. Yeah. But we do get expertise at level 1.
We get expertise right away at level 1, and with 2 levels we get cunning action, which sorcerers love quickening spells. We've talked about how great it is to quicken spells. But sometimes you run out of sorcery points, and sometimes you don't want to use something with your bonus action. Like, sorcery points are a limited resource, and when you're not spending sorcery points to cast quicken spells, sorcerers don't have a lot to do with their bonus action. And so having cunning action means now you can dash and disengage as a bonus action, which actually feels kind of good as a squishy sorcerer who doesn't want to be anywhere near the front.
Okay, yeah.
So I think a 2-level rogue dip. With a 2-level rogue dip, you get expertise in the social skills, which is what we wanted from the bard, and we get cunning action, which is pretty cool on this character.
I don't think you want to take more than a couple levels. I don't think there's any point in grabbing a subclass here. I can't imagine what you would want from, unless you're like, is there something with the Arcane Trickster?
Maybe. And where you could, you know what a spell you can sneak attack with? Booming Blade.
True.
So if you quickened another spell, and then you have nothing, and then maybe you have a high enough dexterity score, you're wielding a dagger or a finesse weapon, that could be just a cool way to get a cantrip pin. But again, it's not as sleek as just being a rogue with Booming Blade.
I think this one's a C for me.
Okay.
I don't. It's something that you could take for those couple levels, but I don't even think it's as good as grabbing a couple levels of Cleric
or Fighter. I don't think it's nearly as good as just the action surge. Yeah. Boom. But yeah, I think that this is one of those ones where I'm like, if your reason for going bard is because you wanted expertise, I think you should consider the 1 level of rogue, because it won't delay your spellcasting as much, even though the spellcasting levels don't stack at all. You're 1 level back as opposed to 3 levels back from the max level spell. So again, trade-offs, depends on what your vision is for the character. It could work.
Are you giving it a C as well?
I'm going to give it a B.
Okay.
Yeah.
As we move on to the Warlock, these two do not combine at all, and nobody in the history of D&D has ever thought or considered combining.
No, it's terrible because Pact Magic doesn't stack with your spellcasting levels. So by my logic, you're delaying your sorcerer spellcasting. Why would you ever do that?
I give this a D ranking, and the Warlock Sorcerer, like, there's not even a good nickname.
Honestly,
for them.
I think that if you combine Sorcerer and Warlock, you should just have to hand in your dice.
Yeah, don't do it.
Yeah. Give over their character sheet, give over their player's handbook, give over their dice. They're obviously not a good...
Yeah, they're not very good at D&D.
No, it's an amazing combination.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, it's really good.
If you stuck through and believed us, I'm sorry.
Yeah. So why is this so good?
Warlock and Sorcerer, I mean, it has the most memorable nickname, the Sorlock.
Yeah.
We all have heard of it. And you're both charisma-based spellcasters. You get Eldritch Blast.
From your Warlock levels.
From your Warlock levels. And Eldritch Blast, you also are going to have access to Invocations, which is going to allow you to do things like take Agonizing Blast and Repelling Blast. But then you get all of the amazing spellcasting of a Sorcerer, and you get a lot more options for dropping that area of effect spell and then blasting enemies into it. And it's way better than just playing a Warlock, and it opens up way more potential than just playing a Sorcerer.
Indeed, it does. The other big thing that makes this good is that Warlock spell slots come back on a short rest. And you can use those Warlock spell slots for your Sorcerer spells, but you can also cash them in for sorcery points. So this combination gives you a way to replenish sorcery points on a short rest, which, if you haven't been following along, that's like a feature that comes at very high levels for sorcerers, which you can get for the low price of 1 or 2 Warlock levels, and maybe 3. Especially if you like the sorcery points, you like cashing that in. If you're in a campaign where you're getting lots of short rests, taking 3 levels of Warlock so those Warlock levels go up to the second level spell slots is really great because you can just cash them in for 4 sorcery points.
Also, let's get the obvious thing out of the way here. If you were looking for how am I going to turn my Sorcerer into a spell sword / gish, whatever you want to call it, the Hexblade is here, allowing you to attack with charisma and do really cool things.
Totally. So you can do that. I don't see that as often as I see the Hexblade Paladin. But Warlock, because this is one where you have to take 5 or 6 levels of Warlock to get extra attack through your Warlock levels.
Yeah, that's if I was playing Sorcerer and wanted it to be a spell sword, this is your best avenue. But I do think that there's a lot of amazing combinations. I think that if you mix like Shadow Sorcerer with like the Undying or Undead Warlock.
Oh, yeah.
Thematically.
Any combination of Sorcerer's Origin and Patron can work really well here.
Yeah.
The sky is kind of the limit.
Yeah,
just like with
no
the Paladin
choice.
And the Sorcerer, there's no bad choice. There really isn't one.
So this is our S tier combo.
Yeah.
I don't think there's a way to go wrong.
No.
With combining these two, and I think that no matter what your combination, it's better than the sum of its parts.
It totally is. There have been cases where this combination gets abused. There is the idea of the coffee lock that uses greater restoration to never have to take rests and just builds up infinite spell slots. That's broken, and it should never be permitted in a serious game. But it's still a feather in the cap for how powerful this build is.
Yeah. So, play it.
Yeah, it's great. Again, you are delaying your access to those very high-level spells. You're slowing the access down, and that can be a trade-off.
But in exchange for power.
Again, the power of Eldritch Blast. This is really what it's all about. It's the power of Eldritch Blast and getting more sorcery points. I think the way to build this character is to probably suffer through the first 5 levels, which you're not really suffering. Take 5 levels of Sorcerer, then grab your 3 levels of Warlock, and then go Sorcerer the rest of the way.
I do think that as we move on to Wizard, 2 primary spellcasters, similar in nature. One learned, and one was born with it. But I actually don't think, because of their similarities, that there's enough here to make it exciting to take Wizard levels. Yeah, the Wizard has a broader spell list, but really the most powerful Wizard spells are at high levels, and we're not going to get there.
Man, I remember back in 3rd edition, when they loved doing crazy things, there was a prestige class called the Ultimate Magus, and it was the Sorcerer Wizard prestige class. This was kind of how we did things in 3rd edition, is instead of multiclassing, there was a prestige class for every combination of 2 classes you could ever want. And what was cool about that was that it almost universally was a good class. Like the Mystic Theurge was the combination of the Wizard and the Cleric. And the Ultimate Magus's thing was that you had double the number of spell slots.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
And 3rd edition meta magic was absolutely wacky as well, and so it just let you do so many things that were wild, and it worked really well, especially because of all those things. But in this game, in 5th edition, none of that. We're here for none of that.
Like, what are you getting? You're getting a spell book and the ability to prepare spells?
You get Find Familiar, because that's not on the Sorcerer spell list.
I feel like there's other ways to get Find Familiar.
There are many other ways to get Find Familiar that don't require you doing a multi-class.
It's strange because like Wizard's incredible. Sorcerer though is my favorite class, but I just don't think. I think that they are rivals. Wizards don't like sorcerers, and sorcerers don't like wizards.
Yeah, and just making it the same. Like, I don't really know what you're going for here. I think in terms of story, right? In the world of Drakenheim, I say that sorcerers can become wizards if they start training at a young age. And that's kind of the way the world of Drakenheim works, is that it's kind of an evolution. And so I could see in a campaign a player changing from being a sorcerer to a wizard, or changing from being a wizard to a sorcerer if, like, they kind of let their studies go and flunked out or something like that. But I wouldn't necessarily imagine them being a multi-class together, because I think they cover so much ground so closely. Incidentally, what I will say is that it's cool to take a couple levels of sorcerer as a wizard to get meta magic.
Yeah.
And so when we talk about the wizard, we can talk about how, like, it's kind of cool to do that and just get a couple of those meta magic things. But that has also been really diminished because of the meta magic adept feat.
Yeah. I do feel like overall, like, the wizard and sorcerer, if we're playing a sorcerer main, we're not getting something like meta magic from taking.
No, we're not doing the other way around, because we're mainly looking to see what do we get from taking a couple levels of wizard and going the rest sorcerer. And I think if you're doing that, you really don't get much, right? The one thing that maybe you could pilfer would be taking 2 levels of divination wizard for portent, which
I can see an argument for, but I don't think it's enough of an argument to make me give this higher than a D.
Really?
I don't. I think it's one of my lower, like, okay, I would take this over Barbarian, but you'd still be like, you have to multi-class with either Barbarian or Wizard. Which are you picking? If I had my run of the options, I'm not picking Wizard.
I feel like we were very harsh in this episode, and so there's a part of me that wants to bump my rating up to a C just to be like, maybe there's something you could do here. But I would never do it. I would never multi-class these 2 classes together.
Are you giving it a C or a D?
I'm going to give it a D.
All right. If there is a build, tell us about it.
Yeah. Yeah, and if you played that build, tell me about it too. Because, I just don't... Why? I just don't know what is the thing that we want. Because, and again, I want to caveat that by saying, I understand why you would take sorcerer levels and then go the rest wizard, but I don't understand why you do the other opposite.
I feel like we haven't called Colby out in this video to do anything, so I don't know, Colby, try building a sorcerer with a few levels of wizard and make it good.
Okay, so here's the kind of weird hack. You take 2 levels of sorcerer just to get meta magic going, or 2 or 3 levels of sorcerer just to get the meta magic happening and get the constitution saving throws right away, and then go the rest wizard.
Yeah, but that's going to be in our wizard video.
Yeah, right. But
we'll talk about that then.
Yeah.
But not now. Now, sorcerer, you don't want wizard.
Yeah.
What does the community think of all of these multi-class options? Up on the screen here, you'll see the what the community voted, and
91% like the Warlock Sorcerer, which I think is the highest approval rating of anything.
Yeah, it's super obvious what the winner is, and it is fair to say that the Paladin is an easy second place with 60.6%. Now, this is really interesting. This is, I think, the most interesting point of this whole episode. We gave the Bard combination a B. It gets 43.9%. But I will also point out that staying a single class sorcerer just scrapes above it with 47.9%. What that tells me is that a B is actually the appropriate thing for the Bard multiclass. Because what this graph tells me, Warlock, 100% yes. Paladin, 100% yes. Then it's kind of a toss-up on whether you just want to be a sorcerer or maybe go Bard for the proper build.
The only other ones with significant votes were the Fighter, the Cleric, and surprisingly the Wizard, and slivers for the Rogue. The Ranger and the Barbarian were the lowest ranked. with the Druid and the Monk and the Artificer also getting not even a full percentage point of people giving it to them. So I think it's interesting how polarized I think the Sorcerer is. This graph really shows what's good is really good and what's not good is really bad.
I think that the Sorcerer, almost more than any other class, only works with other charisma-based classes.
Yeah, and it works well with all of them, depending on what you want. I think, again, the asterisks beside the Bard. And I think that this is one of those clear cases where it's worth really looking at that stay single class beating the Bard. And I do think that the argument there is strong.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you've built any crazy multi-class combinations with the Sorcerer, tell us about them and how they went in the comments below.
The videos that we create on our channel are made possible thanks to the incredible generosity of our Patreon supporters. If you enjoy the work that we do here on YouTube, please consider becoming a patron of the show by following the links right down below.
And if you want to see me playing a single-class Sorcerer in D&D, you can check out our live play in the Worlds of Drakenheim, which airs Tuesday evenings on Twitch. You can find all the previous episodes right up over here.
And we got plenty more tier ranking videos for D&D right up over here.
Please subscribe to our channel, like this video, and ring that bell so that you never miss an episode.
Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you next time
in the dungeon.